Welcome to our next video in our series about buying back your military time. One of the great news about military time is, just like with so many benefits, federal employees, there's exceptions to every rule. And in this video, I want to talk about your reserve time. Now, in the previous videos, we talked about how much does it cost to buy it back. We talked about the process of buying it back with OPM. Now we're going to get into a little bit of exceptions, which is reserve time. Now, if you don't have reserve time, if you don't have any guard time, make sure you stay tuned for our next video, which is pros and cons about buying back your military time. There's still some confusing things that are out there, and we need to make sure, does it make sense to still buy that time back? So stay tuned for that next video. But in this one, we had a great question that's coming from Najee, and he was saying, he has 10 years of reserve time, National Guard time. He says, does that count the same way for buying back military time or not? And just like most benefit questions, the answer is, it depends. Najee, it really depends on what you did and your length of service that you had. So I'm going to transition your question a little bit over to an actual client that we had. We walked through their federal service with them. This client had 22 years of service in the Guard, and out of that time, of that 22 years of Guard service, he had about 6 years of active duty. Now the question is, when he goes to buy that time back with 22 years inside of the Guard, he gets a pension at 60. Yeah, it could be sooner with some other dates in it, etc. We'll leave that aside. But at 60, he's going to get a Guard pension, which is fantastic based on 22 years. But he has this 6 years of active duty time. What happens to that? In addition to that 6 years of active duty time, he had 4 years of academy time. Great news. For your active duty time and your academy time in the reserves, you get to buy this time back. Well, actually, even on the civilian side, regardless of that, if you have 4 years of academy time, that doesn't count towards your military career. You are able to buy that back, which is fantastic. So in this particular person's case, he was able to buy back 10 years of military time. Now, keep in mind, just like we talked about in the past video, that cost is 3%. Well, in the academy, you're not exactly paid high dollars in that period in time of your base pay. Yeah, you're getting a lot of benefits. I'm not ragging on that, right? But your base pay is really, really small. So he had to pay 3% of his base pay, which was virtually nothing at that time, plus interest. And then he also had to pay 3% of his base pay while he was in active duty. Well, half the time he was in active duty, he was in a combat zone. So his base pay, again, was not that large across the board. Most of his pay he was getting in that time was some tax-free pay. So he made the deposit back. He gets 10 plus years added to his federal service. Well, his federal service, he had 25 years when he went to retire of federal service. I get to add those 10 years to it. He now has 35 years of federal service that's going to count towards his pension. Plus, he has a 22-year Guard pension he's getting his full benefits of. This is one of the rare exceptions that you get to double dip at buying back your military time. As you're going to talk about in the next video, you don't get a double dip on that active duty time very often, but only in reserve. So this is a fantastic opportunity. I know when we went through it with him, there was a lot of questions from OPM, from his HR. His HR kept coming back and saying, you cannot double dip, you cannot buy this time back, etc. Here's the rules on military buyback for active duty, which those rules were 100% correct. It just didn't have the exception. And the exception is the Guard time, is the reserve time. You are able to double dip, definitely able to buy that academy time back, which has dramatically increased his pension. Think about that. Instead of 25 years calculating his pension, he's getting 35 years calculating his pension. Not only did he get to retire sooner, which was a fantastic benefit for him, his pension was dramatically higher, which is fantastic. So make sure you're staying tuned for our next video, because in our next video, we're going to talk about some pros and cons of buying back the time. What are the trade-offs that take place with buying back your time? What are you giving up? What are you still gaining? And until then, happy planning.